The lights were blinding. Hundreds of stadium bulbs burned down from the tall poles ringing Willow Creek softball field, turning the cool Nebraska night into harsh daylight. The smell of fresh-cut grass mixed with popcorn and hot dogs still lingered in the air. Parents filled the metal bleachers. Kids waved little blue and gold Thunderbirds flags, and cameras flashed like distant lightning. I stood tall on the temporary winner's podium in the middle of the infield, my Thunderbirds hoodie damp with sweat, heart still pounding from the final out we'd just secured. 7 long years. 7 years of early morning practices, scraped knees, tears after losses, and pure joy after wins. I had taken 12 timid little girls who could barely throw a ball and turned them into the undefeated champions of the season. The crowd was still cheering. Then the microphone crackled to life, and everything changed in a single breath. My father, Peregrine Thomas, stepped up onto the podium beside me. He moved with that slow, deliberate confidence he always used when he wanted the whole room to watch him. His flannel shirt was neatly tucked, his jaw set. He took the mic from the announcer without asking. The cheering slowly died down. A strange silence spread across the field. "Before we present this championship trophy tonight," Peregrine began, his voice booming clear and strong through every speaker, "there is something important that needs to be addressed." My stomach tightened. He paused just long enough for every eye in the stands to lock on to us. Effective immediately, Torin is relieved of all duties as head coach of the Thunderbirds due to serious violations of ethical conduct. The words landed like a slap. A low ripple of shocked murmurs rolled through the crowd. Someone dropped a bag of peanuts. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands, still holding the game ball from the final play, went cold. Peregrine didn't even look at me. He kept speaking, calm and measured, as if he were reading the weather report. "I am also proud to announce that Calidor will step in as the new head coach, and Mr. Victor Langford, one of our most dedicated and generous sponsors, will serve as the new team owner and director going forward." Calidor stood near the dugout fence, arms folded, her expression smooth and composed. She gave a small nod to the crowd, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Then my father turned his head slightly and looked straight at me. "Torin is no longer welcome in this program. He is not the example we want our children to follow." The world narrowed to a sharp, painful point. I heard a small, broken sound behind me on the bench. Isolde. My 8-year-old daughter sat frozen in her uniform, number 7 stitched across her chest. Her little hands gripped the wooden bench so tightly her knuckles were white. Her face had gone completely pale. Those wide eyes, the same eyes that used to light up when I taught her how to field a grounder, now stared at me with pure confusion and fear. "Daddy?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but in the heavy silence it carried like a crack in glass. In 60 brutal seconds, I lost everything I had built, the team I had poured my soul into for 7 years, the respect of every parent who once trusted me with their daughters, and worst of all, the innocent trust in my little girl's eyes. She looked at me like I had done something unforgivable, like the man she believed in had suddenly become a stranger under these blinding lights. My throat burned. My chest felt like it was being crushed. I wanted to grab the microphone, to shout the truth, to tell every single person sitting in those stands what this was really about: control, money, and a father who could never let his son have something that wasn't his to claim. But I didn't move. I just stood there, heart hammering against my ribs, feeling every stare burning into my skin like fire. In that moment, something deep inside me quietly shattered, and something much colder, much quieter, began to stir awake, but to rise again in a way no one expected. And how he taught his little girl that real justice doesn't always come with loud shouting or dramatic fights. Sometimes it comes with quiet, unbreakable choices. The truck's engine hummed low as we drove away from the lights of the softball field. Isolde sat in the passenger seat, still wearing her uniform, number 7 now looking too big on her small frame. She hadn't said a single word since we left the stands. Not one. The silence pressed against the windows like thick fog. I kept my hands steady on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the dark country road leading back to our small house by the river. Every mile felt heavier than the last. In the rearview mirror, the glow of the stadium slowly disappeared behind us, swallowed by the Nebraska night. When we finally pulled into the gravel driveway, the porch light flickered on automatically. Our little wooden house looked the same as always, modest, quiet, with the river murmuring softly behind it. But tonight it felt different. Smaller. Colder. Isolde unbuckled her seatbelt without a sound and walked inside. I followed, carrying her gear bag that suddenly felt too heavy. Inside, the living room was dim. I switched on the lamp and watched as she sat on the edge of the couch, staring at her cleats like they belonged to someone else. I wanted to say something. Anything. Instead, I went to the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of water, and set one in front of her. She didn't touch it. Later, after she had gone to bed, I sat alone at the small wooden table and opened my laptop. My hands were shaking slightly as I logged into the team's shared drive. What I found made my blood run cold. There they were. Official documents dated 3 months ago. Transfer of ownership, change of coaching staff, signatures already in place. Peregrine's bold handwriting next to Ottilie's careful one. Even Calidor had signed as the incoming coach. And there, at the bottom of the sponsorship agreement, Victor Langford's name. In exchange for his generous donation, his son would receive priority placement and playing time. They had planned this for months, while I was staying late after practice, running extra drills for the girls who needed help, while I was driving Isolde to weekend tournaments. While I believed we were building something real together, they had already decided I was disposable. I closed the laptop slowly. The click of the lid sounded too loud in the quiet house. The next few days blurred into a heavy fog. Parents who used to text me every week now went silent. No calls, no messages asking about summer training. When I ran into one of the moms at the grocery store, she looked away quickly and pretended to study the cereal aisle. Fear was written all over her face, fear of losing her daughter's spot on the old team. I understood, but understanding didn't make it hurt any less. At home, Isolde grew quieter. She stopped wearing her Thunderbirds hoodie. One evening I found her favorite batting gloves hidden deep under her bed, pushed behind old stuffed animals. When I gently asked if she wanted to practice catching in the backyard, she shook her head and whispered, "Can we just not talk about softball anymore?" That night she crawled into my lap on the couch, smaller than I remembered. "Daddy, did I do something wrong?" Her voice cracked on the last word. My throat tightened so hard I could barely breathe. I wrapped my arms around her and held her close, pressing my cheek against her soft hair that still smelled like grass and sunshine. "No, sweetheart," I whispered. "You did everything right." She didn't ask again. But I saw the doubt in her eyes every time she looked at me. That night, after she finally fell asleep, I lay in my own bed, staring at the ceiling. The river outside whispered endlessly. My chest felt like it was filled with stones. How could my own father do this? How could my mother and sister stand beside him and watch me bleed in front of my daughter? The betrayal burned deeper than any anger I had ever known. It wasn't just about the team. It was about blood. About the people who were supposed to protect me, choosing to break me instead. I wanted to scream into the pillow. I wanted to drive back to their house and demand answers. But I didn't. I stayed silent. For Isolde. Because every time I looked at her small, sleeping face, I knew one thing for certain. If I fell apart now, she would fall with me. So I swallowed the rage. I buried the pain. I kept my voice steady during the day and my hands gentle when I tucked her in at night. But inside, something was building. A slow, burning pressure. A quiet storm gathering behind my eyes. I didn't know what I would do yet. But I knew I couldn't keep living like this. Not anymore. The rain came down in sheets that night, hammering against the old tin roof like it wanted to break through. I stood under the leaking awning of the abandoned practice field on the edge of Willow Creek, the one nobody had used for years. Water streamed off my hood as I watched a small figure running through the puddles, soaked to the bone. It was Finn Whitaker, 9 years old. One of the most naturally gifted kids I'd ever seen swing a bat. But Victor Langford had cut him from Thunderbirds 3 weeks earlier with a single cold sentence. "He's not the right fit for our program." Finn stopped when he saw me. His shoulders were shaking from cold or from crying. I couldn't tell. He walked closer, cleats squelching in the mud, and looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "They took everything, Coach Torin," he said, voice cracking. "My spot. My chance. They said I wasn't good enough. But I know why. It's because my mom can't write big checks like the others." A sob broke out of him, raw and angry. "They stole it. All of it." Those words hit me harder than the rain. I crouched down so we were eye level. The cold water ran down my neck, but I barely felt it. Something inside my chest, that heavy, suffocating weight I had carried since the night under the lights, shifted. It didn't disappear. It caught fire. I didn't say anything right away. I just let the rain fall between us, watching this brave little boy stand there, refusing to run for shelter even though he was trembling. That night, after I drove Finn home and promised his worried mother I would look after him, I sat in my truck for a long time with the engine off. No more silence. No more swallowing the betrayal. I was done waiting for justice to come from the same people who had stabbed me in the back. The next morning, while Isolde was still asleep, I drove out to the same forgotten field again. The rain had stopped, but the ground was soft and muddy. I stood alone in the middle of the overgrown diamond and looked around at the cracked bleachers and rusted chain-link fence. This was where it would begin. Not with lawsuits, not with shouting matches in front of lawyers, with the kids nobody else wanted. The ones who had been cut, overlooked, or pushed aside, just like Finn. Just like Isolde was starting to feel. That afternoon, I found Lena Carver at the small Willow Creek Gazette office. She was the local reporter who had covered Thunderbirds for years. She looked surprised when I walked in, but she listened. When I told her what I wanted to do, build a new team from the ground up. No money, no politics, just kids who loved the game, something softened in her eyes. "I'll help," she said quietly. "Off the record at first, but I'll make sure people hear the real story when the time comes." I left her office with the first real breath I had taken in weeks. That evening, the house by the river felt different. Isolde was sitting at the kitchen table, drawing on an old notebook. When I walked in, she looked up, her eyes still carrying that shadow of doubt from the night at the field. I sat down across from her. The rain had started again, tapping gently against the window. I reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "We're going to play again, sweetheart," I said, my voice low but steady. "But we're going to do it our way. No fancy sponsors, no big lights, just us, and the kids who really love the game." She searched my face for a long moment. "Even after what Grandpa did?" I nodded slowly. "Especially after what Grandpa did." For the first time in many days, a tiny spark flickered in her eyes. Not quite hope yet, but something close. As I tucked her into bed later that night, I stood in the doorway for a while, watching her small form under the blanket. The ember had been lit. It was small, fragile, dangerous, but it was mine. And for the first time since that night under the blinding lights, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was beginning to move, quietly, carefully, toward something they could never take away again. 3 months had passed since that rainy night on the abandoned field. The old diamond by the river no longer looked forgotten. Every evening after school, under the fading summer light, a small group of kids gathered there, the ones nobody else wanted. They wore mismatched jerseys and hand-me-down cleats, but they ran harder, laughed louder, and listened closer than any team I had ever coached. We called them the River Shadows. I stood on the pitcher's mound one golden afternoon, watching Isolde take charge as the unofficial team captain. She moved between the younger kids with quiet confidence, adjusting stances, offering encouragement, her ponytail swinging as she demonstrated a clean throw. The shadow that had clouded her eyes since that night under the lights was slowly lifting. She was smiling again. Helping her were 2 people who had become unexpected anchors. Maeve Delgado, a single mother who once played college softball, now worked as a chef at the local diner. She showed up every practice with coolers full of homemade snacks and protein balls, her warm laugh cutting through the tension whenever a kid got frustrated. "Food first, heart second," she always said, ruffling hair and wiping away tears with the same steady hands that used to catch line drives. And then there was Elliot Kane, 17 years old, tall and quiet, with sharp eyes and quicker hands. Peregrine had kicked him off the Thunderbirds months ago for bad attitude. Now he stood beside me as my assistant coach, demonstrating techniques with a patience I never expected from someone so young. He never spoke much, but when he did, the kids listened. Together, we built something real. No sponsors, no politics, just sweat, dirt, and second chances. Then the news came like thunder. River Shadows had somehow fought their way through the district tournament and made it to the championship game against the Thunderbirds, the same team that had once been mine. The night before the final, the air felt thick with coming rain. I was locking up the equipment when I heard footsteps on the gravel behind me. Peregrine. He stood under the single streetlight near the old fence, hands in his pockets, looking older than I remembered. His face carried both anger and something dangerously close to desperation. "Torin," he said, voice low. "We need to talk." I didn't move. I simply waited. He stepped closer, the light casting long shadows across his face. "This has gone far enough. You've made your point. Take the team back if you want quietly, or at least don't humiliate your sister and me in front of the whole town tomorrow." His tone shifted, mixing threat with a hint of pleading. "Think about Isolde. Think about what this will do to her if you keep pushing. Family is still family, son. Don't throw everything away over pride." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. Inside were printed emails dated months before the night at the championship game. Clear proof of the secret meetings between Peregrine, Ottilie, Calidor, and Victor Langford. Plans to remove me. Promises made in exchange for money and control. I held the papers out to him without a word. Peregrine took them. His hands trembled slightly as he scanned the pages under the dim light. His face went pale. "You kept all this?" I finally spoke, my voice calm and steady. "I didn't start this fight, Dad. You did. The moment you chose to destroy me in front of my daughter." He opened his mouth, maybe to threaten, maybe to beg again, but nothing came out. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone under that lonely streetlight, the papers still clutched in his hands. The next morning, the championship field was packed. Parents, kids, reporters, the whole town seemed to have shown up. The air buzzed with nervous energy as the two teams warmed up on opposite sides of the diamond. Isolde stood tall in her River Shadows jersey, glove in hand, looking across at the Thunderbirds with steady eyes. No fear, only quiet determination. Maeve gave last-minute hugs and whispered words of encouragement. Elliot adjusted a young player's cap and offered a rare, small smile. I looked at my daughter, at the girl who had once asked me if she had done something wrong, and felt my chest tighten with both pride and ache. The storm was here, and whatever happened in the next 2 hours would change everything. The sky over Willow Creek was heavy and gray, like it was holding its breath. The championship field was packed tighter than I had ever seen it. Parents lined the fences, kids waved signs, and a low murmur of anticipation rolled through the stands as the two teams took the field. River Shadows versus Thunderbirds. My daughter stood at shortstop in her faded gray jersey, glove ready, eyes focused. No trace of the frightened little girl from that night under the bright lights. Beside her, Finn Whitaker crouched in the outfield, determined. Elliot stood near third base, arms crossed, watching every movement with quiet intensity. Maeve paced behind the dugout, her hands clenched tight with nervous hope. The first pitch was thrown. From the very beginning, the difference was clear. River Shadows played like one heartbeat, passing glances, encouraging shouts, quick adjustments. They moved together, trusted each other. The Thunderbirds, on the other hand, looked fractured. Arguments broke out between plays, shoulders were tense, eyes avoided one another. The game stayed tight, inning after inning. Tension built with every swing, every catch, every close call. Then came the bottom of the final inning. Score tied. 2 outs. Runner on third. Isolde stepped up to the plate. The crowd grew hushed. I stood frozen in the coach's box, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. She took a deep breath, adjusted her grip, and stared down the pitcher. The pitch came. Crack. The ball flew clean into the gap between center and right field. The runner from third sprinted home. Isolde rounded first base, legs pumping, ponytail flying. The throw came in, but it was too late. The umpire's voice cut through the sudden roar. Safe. The River Shadows had won. The final out was made a moment later, but the game was already decided. For a few long seconds, everything seemed to freeze. Then chaos erupted. Our kids rushed the field, screaming with joy, piling onto one another in a messy, beautiful celebration. Maeve was laughing through tears. Elliot allowed himself a rare, wide grin as the younger ones jumped around him. On the other side of the diamond, the Thunderbirds stood in stunned silence. Peregrine and Ottilie remained motionless near the fence, faces pale and hollow. Calidor stood a few steps away, head bowed, unable to look in my direction. Victor Langford didn't even wait for the handshakes. He simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd without a word. I didn't feel triumph. I felt something quieter, deeper. I walked slowly onto the field and knelt down in front of Isolde. She was breathing hard, cheeks flushed, eyes shining with a mixture of exhaustion and pure joy. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight against my chest. "Listen to me, sweetheart," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "Winning this game, it's not about the trophy. Real victory is refusing to let anyone else decide your worth." She hugged me back fiercely, her small arms wrapped around my neck. "I know, Daddy," she whispered. "I know." Later that evening, as the sky finally cleared into soft twilight, we gathered down by the river behind our house. No big celebration, just a simple cookout. Maeve grilled burgers and hot dogs while laughing with the kids. Elliot helped set up old picnic tables. The River Shadows players ran around with sticky fingers and dirty uniforms, telling stories of every play as if they had just won the World Series. Peregrine, Ottilie, and Calidor approached quietly from the edge of the yard. They stood there awkwardly, faces uncertain. Peregrine opened his mouth, searching for words. "Torin, we—" I raised my hand gently, stopping him. "Not tonight," I said softly. "Some things can't be fixed with words anymore." They lingered for a moment longer, then turned and walked away into the growing dark. I watched them go without anger, only a quiet sadness for what had been lost. Isolde came up beside me and slipped her small hand into mine. She looked up at me, her face glowing in the light of the string lanterns we had hung between the trees. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she whispered. Those 4 words landed softer and warmer than any championship trophy ever could. I squeezed her hand and smiled down at her. As the fireflies began to dance above the river and the laughter of the kids filled the night air, I realized something important. Justice didn't have to mean destruction. Sometimes the strongest revenge wasn't tearing down what others had built. It was building something beautiful, something honest and unbreakable with the people who truly mattered. And in that quiet moment by the river, surrounded by second chances and real love, we had done exactly that. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment, and thank you for riding with us today. Aviso Legal. Disclaimer. Our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully only to support production while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.